I was kind of excited this morning when I woke up to a comment on my YouTube channel. And it was from a viewer who had watched my video about, is the coronavirus a cover? And the fact that I had talked about sulfur dioxide as being a potential issue or layer that wasn't being considered in all of this. And of course, I was just beginning to unearth the layers. I didn't get much of a response to that assertion of mine, but I intuitively knew it was a factor. Now, of course, I was just beginning to unearth the layers, and the layer I went to first was, of course, who would be the offender of sulfur dioxide, and all of these new UN rules that dictate the amount of sulfur found in diesel fuels, I knew was a layer, considering there's a shortage of it, and it's absolutely necessary to keep the world economy on time. Then, this weekend, I'm just listening to videos non-stop, all the time. And all of a sudden I heard this incinerator talk. And I heard about these protests that had happened in Wuhan and Shenzhen. But when I started digging in, these protests were back in 2015 and actually were put forth by the Daily Mail. Keep that in the back of your mind. And apparently the government said, oh, okay, we'll just give up in China. And that was the last we heard of it. In fact, it went to court, and of course the state won, as they would in China. But we haven't heard another word about this environmental problem. Now, this whole problem stemmed from what Agenda 2030, the United Nations, the crew at Davos this year, and the last consecutive years have been masterminding this new type of economy called a circular economy. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about that term, just like sustainable. It's too bad sustainable has been hijacked. Now, the circular economy has certain principles, and one of them is taking waste and converting it into energy. And it sounds like an amazing plan, doesn't it? I know. And when I first heard about it many years ago, I thought it was quite amazing. The problem is that there are toxic consequences that they seldom discuss. Sulfur dioxide is also, part of that whole greenhouse gas set. And of course now everybody's thinking CO2. They forgot about that sulfur dioxide and the water vapor emitted. There are many derivatives that can be created. Sulfur dioxide can also be used in this solar radiation management strategy they have. They spray it in the stratosphere to block the sun so they can cool the planet and save us from global warming. The Daily Mail broke that one last spring too. Of course, it's been going on since 2012, but the Daily Mail is kind of that propaganda arm that makes it official. And DMG Media sort of is the first layer, I call it, of laying the groundwork. So this morning, the first article I found was, in fact, the Daily Mail. And the fact that sulfuric acid, high SO2 levels or sulfur dioxide levels have been seen all over China. And I felt redeemed, but then knew exactly what's going on. Now, all of these apparently are the fixture of, there's 11 pilot free trade zones taking place right now, underway. The initial groundwork has been established, but it also encompasses a whole lot more grounds. Think of all of these pilot free trade areas in China, kind of like giant exposition grounds. Part of it is propaganda to bring people in to show them this new circular economy. Now, in each of these areas, you're finding these incredible innovations like waste to energy. And where they place these plants was actually like right next to residential areas, which is why in 2015 it wasn't going over so well with the Chinese in Wuhan and Shenzhen. So therefore, the protests, the smells emanating was a major factor in a lot of the chatter that I read. And of course I experienced that, and it's kind of what led me to this whole sulfur dioxide thing when I was driving through our area here in Regina down the road of our gas refining plant. The interesting thing as well is that the virus has actually remarkably followed the path of all of these free trade zones. And Raphael O'Neill pointed out like Thursday that in fact on the live virus map by Johns Hopkins, there were no cases in Wuhan. But in fact, they are encompassed in every area, as I cross-matched, that these free trade zones are in. Sulfur dioxide is a problem. Now, the Daily Mail, of course, said that high sulfur dioxide must be coming from all the bodies being burned. The death count must be more. Always making us speculate the worst because it will never be able to be confirmed, but leading us to believe that this is why you would see high sulfur dioxide levels from cremating bodies. Really? Pretty crazy. Another interesting fact is the fact that Africa and South America have been spared. Yes. Somehow they negotiated themselves to be cut off from direct travel from China. Although all the Western nations that got cases already, it's continued on. There's no interruption. Why did we get exposed and they don't get exposed? I don't understand. Are we better equipped to handle it? Are they more vulnerable populations? Well, that's exactly what they said. In fact, the World Health Organization, you know who, that they were going to take measures to protect vulnerable nations, but not us. And they've proven that, because that's exactly the measures they've taken. Interestingly enough, not another peep the minute that the first case in Hong Kong occurs. Now only 2 cases, 2 deaths of coronavirus outside of China, Hong Kong and the Philippines. Both were in Wuhan. But remarkably, the protests of Hong Kong, the democracy protests, where they weren't giving up, they're done. not a peep. All designed to keep us in line. We need to see how we are being influenced. And in fact, this is sort of a terrorism of sorts to keep us in a position where we just cannot deduct the truth, so that the truth only comes from one source, so that we can't freely discuss our ideas. And in fact, if I hadn't gone on camera and discussed my idea that I was having and the conversation I'd been having with myself, I wouldn't have come across those incinerators and the fact that they are in fact part of this sustainable vision of the future. And there's certain people who don't want you to know that. In fact, the Daily Mail is one of them, because if you take a look, although they have a lot of brands, that doesn't tell the whole story. In fact, 70% of DMG Media is Euromoney Institutional Investor, PLC. They have an interest in all of these sustainable green initiatives. It's all wrapped up right before our very eyes. So many layers to peel away. Another layer, and a quick discussion of it, but is 5G. That has been unleashed in a national level in China, and that can actually accentuate the symptoms of a virus or sulfur dioxide poisoning, ailments in general. Sulfur dioxide poisoning has a lot of the same characteristics, symptoms as coronavirus, meaning fever, meaning respiratory. Hard to distinguish. There's also a real reorganization underway, because each of these zones require quite a bit more land to make them adhere to the whole concept of the circular economy. I think you'll find that after the coronavirus is over in China, there won't be a lot of opposition left to their plans. Because the truth is, there could be some truth to the fact that the Chinese would be incinerating a lot of people. There would, because opposition is not tolerated there. And any opportunity to rid opposition, I don't doubt would be taken. Something to think about. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd love to have you. And of course, you'll find me on Facebook and Instagram. Keep critical thinking and digging, because it's amazing what you find when you peel away the layers.